Alright, so we had two releases this weekend, one in theaters and then one that Netflix put out. Before we get to those real quick, there was something about if anybody likes the stuff that I do with my brother or the wrestling stuff that Owen and Ashley put out on occasion. My brother and my sister-in-law started a wrestling-themed podcast on Spotify that they do, apparently they're going to do on Tuesdays, which is called Raw as Hell, as in War as Hell, and they talk about like WWE, NXT, AEW, and probably whatever else comes up. So I just wanted to put the word on that. I probably should have gotten a link from him, but I will probably do that in the future. But yeah, so if that type of thing interests you at all, please, by all means, go check them out as well. So, we're going to start with Birds of Prey, of course, which I really wasn't quite sure about going into, because I do get the whole idea of what happened with Suicide Squad, and I've talked about Suicide Squad endlessly at this point. Me and my brother just talked about it in a video a few months ago, again, in that Joker video we did, and my opinion of it, for the uninitiated, is I really, really, really wanted to love it so much when it came out, and I just didn't. And I have tried multiple times watching it again, because it's like, I feel like one of these days I'm gonna like it, at least a little more. But every time I watch Suicide Squad, it gets worse. So, and so it's basically them kind of trying to backtrack. It's sort of like, I guess it's somewhat comparable to Margot Robbie trying to do with Harley Quinn what Ryan Reynolds was able to do with Deadpool, where there was the first time where it didn't work out so much, and then when he got to redo it like himself with his own movie, then it really took off and people loved it, and it gave a better face to the character as far as movie adaptations go. But there was still a lot of praise for Robbie in Suicide Squad. I wasn't really one of those people. Uh, but I don't know if it came off too try hard or what. And I get it's a good representation of the character from the animated series and the comics and all that. But after I saw Robbie in it and then I heard the reaction, it was like, maybe the Harley Quinn character just isn't for me. I don't know, because I didn't mind her in the series or the comics, but I don't know. As far as live action went, it just didn't really sit right with me. So I really wasn't sure how I was going to go into this, but yeah. First off, to note that I felt that even though she's playing the same character, and most people probably see it as the same performance, there was something here that I liked a lot more than what she was doing in Suicide Squad, because I think it's more. Because in this case, with her being the lead and with the different setups, this gives her like an arena to just go nuts through the entire movie. But there was still something, I think it's that quirky factor, I think, that I'm not so much into. And while that's obviously here, for sure, it felt a bit more, I guess, reined in than it did in Suicide Squad. Like, it didn't feel like, it felt much more like she was lived in the character, whereas I thought in Suicide Squad it kind of felt like trying too hard a little bit. It feels just kind of much more like it's naturally coming out of her at this point. So all of that worked, because there was the very start when we get the animated opening that gives us Harley Quinn's backstory, and she's, narrating and all that. And that was when I was getting the vibe of, I see what they're going for, and I get that it's like, it's really, really high on the quirkiness factor, and the way the characters are animated is very fan servicey, but even so, it does serve as like a quick introduction, which is the best as far as getting backstory on a character we've already been introduced to. That's the more you can sum up quickly your backstories, the better off you're going to be. So I guess I can't have too many problems with it, except for when they try to do that throughout the movie with the other characters, in which case it does kind of happen one too many times where it's because she's narrating throughout. So it's one of those cases of they kind of play with the timeline a little bit, but it's always her. She's trying to do the Downey in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang thing, where it's like, oh shit, I forgot to tell you this thing, and oh, I'm such a bad narrator, all that stuff. And I mean, I guess once you've seen Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, the novelty of that kind of thing has worn off. But that also gives us a few more backstories than we probably need. It felt a lot more like it was kind of stuck in, we're really trying to do a franchise here thing. But for the stuff about the characters, we may not always need. There are a couple characters like Huntress, where it's like the backstory ties into the full-on story, which makes sense, but it's also that portion of the story is basically just a MacGuffin anyway. It's just there for them to have a reason they're facing off against Ewan McGregor, which is weird because there's already so many reasons that they're going against each other. But they kind of tried to add this whole diamond storyline into it, which I guess gives it like a cohesion. Whereas if it was just them, going up against each other with no real center, like no real somewhat plot going on, then it would have probably come out maybe a bit messier. But I don't know. I still don't feel it was entirely necessary, but I get why it's there. So yeah. On top of Mary Elizabeth Winstead, we had Journey Smollett doing Black Canary and Rosie Perez doing Renee Montoya. And when I first saw that, it was like, that is, Rosie Perez as Renee Montoya is such perfect casting. It's one of those cases of, if you were to ask me who should play her, I probably would have said Rosie Perez, thinking it would never actually happen. So that was real nice to see. Even though you could say that the others in the story kind of don't really. They keep coming in and out, and you can tell they're kind of trying to do an ensemble thing, but it does feel like they're pretty underutilized until the end, and then they're like super utilized. So there's a really good payoff to it, but I do think they could have tried to do a little more with those characters before the climax, other than just giving us their backstories. But what they have to work with, they do pretty well. So once again, it's hard. You can see where faults. This is a movie full of stuff where you can see where faults would be and where they could have overdone it, and the fact that they avoid those things is what makes it so appealing in the long run and makes it work so well. So yeah, it was really just kind of watching them dodge obstacles as they made this movie and put the script together and everything that ends up making it work. And talking about the villain being Ewan McGregor, who I figured I would love him in this, especially when I heard he was going to go like super over the top. But that's kind of the great thing that makes him work, is that it's another thing of avoiding something that they could have done, is that he is super over the top, but it still doesn't feel like, just when he's getting ready to go too over the top, he stops. And so he's just this perfect level of like hammy that's amazing. And even when they're throwing tropes at a lot of the characters, because he's got that trope going for him where he's, the hardcore villain and he's doing all this violent stuff to people. He's hired Zaz to cut off people's faces and all that. And, like, he thinks nothing of this, but then if he sees, like, just minor gross things like snot or something, then he's super grossed out. He's wearing, like, gloves all the time. And that's something that he even manages to make work also. Like, every time he said ew to something, it was just the funniest thing in the world to me. And we got, like, bombarded with snow overnight. So, and I'd already had the ticket. I got it a couple of days ago, so I paid in cash, so I had no choice but to go. So because of the snow, I'm pretty sure is the reason, I was the only person in there. And it was, like, the biggest theater. And you would have probably just heard me cackling at most of the things Ewan McGregor does. Well, and he's that funny while also being like an actually effective villain. And there's even it may seem like overkill because he gets some scenes where it's like they're clearly in there just to play up how evil he is. That probably would have worked better as more introductory scenes, but they happen like way in the middle of the movie, long after we've met him, when he does something and he does something like intimidating. But it's like the scene is only there to show how intimidating he is. Like it's not connected to anything else at all. But I'm still perfectly fine with that stuff because the more McGregor we got in this movie, the better. So, and that's not to say like it's not one of those cases where I was waiting for him to like liven up. The whole movie is like incredibly lively. Like I said, Robbie really keeps it alive, being the lead of it. But I really love those McGregor scenes too. So that was a nice balance without making one character much more watchable than another, because that tends to happen, especially in like the DC area where the villains are much more have much more of that presence and that charisma than the heroes. But when you've got, a hero in big quotes like Harley Quinn, because that's the thing too that they did really well here was that Suicide Squad was really annoying about was Suicide Squad kept telling us over and over and over again, they're bad guys, we're bad guys, but you didn't really much get that vibe. You knew they were all gonna fucking love each other, and that stupid bar scene and all that, and what she says to Enchantress with, you messed with my friends, or whatever the bullshit was she said. And the biggest offender, I think, is when Rick Flag says to her in Suicide Squad, "What the hell is wrong with you?" This is after she's stolen a fucking purse. It's like, so in this one, she does get to show off much more villainy. Like in one of the opening scenes, she feeds a dude to a hyena. And it's like right then, there's like that tone setting of like, okay, finally, this is who Suicide Squad tried to build her up to be, but this movie's gonna actually fucking show it. So thank you. And that's not to say that they, because there are a lot of scenes where she gets into fights, but most of the altercations she gets into, she uses non-lethal means, which might seem a bit contradictory, but I do think that, like, well, first off, it just kind of goes with the character and gives it that comic booky feel when she, like, raids the police station and uses all of her, like, non-lethal weapons, but the thing about that also is, like, if she did go in there and just start, like, all those people we see her take out with non-lethal weapons, if that had just been her offing all of them, that would have quite literally been overkill. So I thought that really played into the character nicely, but was also to give us stuff like feeding to do the hyena to show us that what she's really capable of in the long run, if it, comes to that, or if she's feeling, I guess, evil enough at that particular moment. So that's yeah. As far as portraying her as a villain that's also the hero, this is significantly better handled than whatever the fuck David Ayer was trying to do. And then you've got the action in the movie in general, which is really nice because, weirdly enough, it's not like, I mean, it's stylized, but it's not like overly edited. But it is definitely very stylized. I was almost getting some Zack Snyder vibes here and there, particularly with use of slow-mo, but the thing is it does, a lot of those scenes, particularly like the police station scene, do fall into it's another one of those tropes that they can't help but fall into, where I can imagine, like, it's great and everything that they're not, like, super edited and super choppy, these fight scenes and these action scenes, but it does feel like this was a great opportunity to show off how badass she can be by having her go in single-handedly and take on all these people. But it kind of takes away from that when we fall into the trope of it's usually I don't get too banana shave about this, but this is a blatant example of that cliche of it's one person fighting a huge group of people, but the huge group of people stand around and watch while she kicks somebody's ass one at a time. There's a lot of that, and I feel like kind of watching them kind of close in and just happening all at once, I think probably would have shown off the character much more than this, but yeah, maybe that's all they could. You can only ask Margot Robbie to do so much stunt-wise, I guess. But, and then also talking about cliches, yeah, there is the whole thing where this whole diamond thing has started off by a kid that she now has to protect because Ewan McGregor wants that diamond and she's got it because she stole it off of Zaz. Zaz, who is played by Chris Messina, which I knew going in. I'd known for a while he was playing Zaz, but I actually didn't recognize him right away. Like, it took, like, a couple of scenes for me to go, oh yeah, that's him. And I love what they did with that character also, where it's like he's super threatening because we get the face cutting off thing very early. It's like probably his first scene or one of his first scenes. And then it's also, he's just kind of the not quite bumbling sidekick of Black Mask, but but yeah, that reference doesn't fit in here that I was going to say, so we'll just move on from there. But I did really like the way they handled that character also. Even if I do think, like, once we get to the climax, and I said everything comes together and all the characters are working together, it's great and it's big, and I love how cinematic everything looks also, especially Gotham with that sort of, like, neon look to it, where it's, but they're not overdoing the neon thing either, which they really could have. But it is the case of the individual confrontations towards the climax feel very sort of anticlimactic. In one case, I think that might be the point, but it still felt like there was kind of a lot of build-up, and then it's just kind of done very quickly, and then it kind of gives you all the sequel bait and all that, so there is that. But like I was saying, though, it doesn't follow, like, it doesn't get away from itself despite having stuff like a MacGuffin plot or the cliche of Harley Quinn has to hang out with a kid and do all that stuff, which is the plot that most movies seem to fall back on for some reason. I don't know why every action character, or whoever character, has to be hanging out with a kid for a movie story to move on, but we've been stuck in that cliche forever, so yeah. Sometimes it works, a lot of the time it doesn't, and this one, I guess because the two characters actually mesh well enough, that it just doesn't hinder the movie in any way, so yeah, I think that's about it. So yeah, it basically manages to avoid all the stuff that could have made it really shitty or made it another Suicide Squad. But it's like, it's towing the line a lot. But for the most part, it pretty much stays on the right side of things. So I would say this will probably succeed in washing out the taste of Suicide Squad. I know Suicide Squad still has its fans, and particularly that whole Hot Topic fan base where it's like, you know, Joker and Harley are like the go-to couple for these people in some weird way, and the fact that this movie very much calls attention to that in like the first 10 minutes almost feels like an answer to that reaction to their relationship, if you want to call it that. So yeah, so it could have like really tried to work hard and try too hard to say, hey, we're so not so, trying it harder than Ryan Reynolds, which if you've seen like one of these videos, you know my opinion on Deadpool and Ryan Reynolds in general. So I'll just leave that at that. But it could have gone in the territory of like, and as far as the R rating goes, also where it's like they're trying way too hard to sell it as something, to sell it as, oh, if you hated Suicide Squad, this will make it better, or the whole, hey, we're better now because we're R rated, and everybody that used to be in a PG-13 movie now likes to say fuck constantly, like what happened with Logan. As amazing as Logan is, still it's, yeah. And so you run the risk of, you could be, you know, successful in doing it like the first Deadpool or Logan, or you can be last year's Hellboy. And this one, thankfully, manages to be not as pandering as Ryan Reynolds, nor as, you know, try hard as the new Hellboy. So there's that. So yeah, I think that's pretty much how I feel about that. I got a little disjointed there at the end, but it happens. So let's go on to Horse Girl, which is the movie that Netflix put out this morning, starring Alison Brie, that came out of Sundance. And good God, did it come out of Sundance. I feel like this is a movie where a more cynical person might say they might as well have branded this movie's poster with the Sundance logo before they even got in there, before the thing was even made, because it's got that written all over it. It's from Jeff Baena, who did Life After Beth and The Little Hours, neither of which I'm a fan of. The Little Hours especially is fucking terrible. But the producers on it are the Duplass brothers, who I absolutely love. So there's a weird sort of balance going on here where I can see the Duplass brothers in it a little bit, even if Jay is actually in it, and you can kind of get a sense of them ever so lightly. But obviously, Baina's the director, and he and Alison Brie co-wrote it. They have writing credits, but I also heard like almost the whole movie's improvised, so I'm not quite sure, you know, where that's kind of a blurriness there, but yeah. So it's kind of a hard movie to even like, where do you start with this? Because we're following the Alison Brie character, who at the start just sort of seems like it's kind of hard to tell if she's happy where she is in like her own little world where she talks to horses and has one particular like a sort of affection for one in particular, to the point that she kind of weirds out the people that work in the stable, and she's obsessed with this really cheesy TV show that they've created for the movie, but they do so well at creating like a cheesy detective slash paranormal shitty TV show you'd see on like USA or TNT or some shit that I actually had to almost look up to see if it was an actual show or not. Um, and that ends up playing a big part in her like psyche and how she gets a little too obsessed with the things around her, but maybe there's something already wrong with her. But for a large portion of the movie, like the first half or so, or slightly before that, it's hard to tell if she's happy in this world that she's kind of stuck in with her horse and the TV show and all that other stuff that she's obsessed with, or if there's like a lonely, if she's lonely or in denial of loneliness. It also kind of seems like she's genuinely doesn't need anything else but the horse and the TV show. But then, once we see her start to interact with other people, maybe there is something there that seems like it's missing. And for a while, it just seems like it's about a girl that's combating loneliness. But then we go into much more things like potential schizophrenia and blackouts and sleepwalking and paranoia and all this other stuff that kind of sometimes slowly, sometimes not so slowly reveals itself. The pacing is kind of all over the place in regards to how this character is unveiled to us, like step by step. And there's something about her that gets our attention immediately, like when she's interacting with the people that work at the stable and all that, where she has people that are close to her, like Molly Shannon, who she works with, but she doesn't seem to see outside of work. But then, and they have, like, the first scene is just the two of them talking like they're best friends, but then every time another character is introduced, the way we see them interact with Alison Brie's character, they seem really, like, put off by her. And it's like, you can't tell if you have that question where, like, are we eventually going to see why they feel put off by her, or is she just surrounded by assholes? And that's kind of the questions you're asking yourself at the start. But then as it goes on, it's hard to gauge what they really wanted to do with this exactly. Where it's like when you're watching these scenes with her and the horse, or the way she interacts with people, it's like, I can't tell if they want us to sympathize with her, or if they're going for, like, the cringe thing. Like the cringe humor that comes out of, like, The Office or something like that. And I don't know. But then it eventually gets into, she starts having these weird sort of lucid dreams, some of which have John Ortiz in them, and then she starts seeing John Ortiz in real life. And it becomes this whole thing of, like, when is she dreaming and hallucinating? Is she not? Is she paranoid? Is she not? Is something supernatural going on? Is there something involving aliens? And they just throw a whole shitload of questions at us. And it's that thing where I think you can see what they want to do, where it's, like, we keep questioning, like, oh, is she, paranoid or schizophrenic, or is this really happening, or whatever. And I don't really know that the way they set up the first half and the way they set up the character, that's such a weird way to go. Because it's like, once she does, whether it's what they were looking for, like I said, I don't know if they're going with sympathy or cringe or what, but we do, through Brie's performance, we do genuinely start to sympathize with her. But then once we finally realize, oh, maybe we're supposed to sympathize with her, it starts going in different directions. To the point that it's one of those movies where it gets so, stuck in the whole dream hallucination thing, where it's like, they spend so much time on that, after a while, you just kind of stop caring whether it's real or not. Because it's like, it's almost like, you can't tell if they're going to try to pull, like, some rug out from under you. That's the vibe you keep getting throughout it. It's like, you're just kind of waiting to, like, watch something for a long period of time, and then the more you watch it, the more you're waiting for like a cut that shows you that everything was hallucination or something like that. And when you get to anticipate something like that, when that's the feeling they set up, you just kind of stop caring about everything, because it's like we may or what we're seeing now may or may not be even be happening, and that's something you can pull off with the right execution. But this is, I just don't know that. I said, just as far as as a filmmaker himself, I'm clearly not a fan of anything Bane has done yet. So I don't know that of the things he's done so far, a zombie romantic comedy with Life After Beth, and a we're doing a movie about nuns, but it's super super dirty bullshit like The Little Hours. And it's like these surface level ideas that never went anywhere in his movies. And it's like, this is not the kind of material for a director that can't get past surface level at all. And because, once again, that's pretty much exactly where the movie stays. Where it's like, it just kind of starts showing us incoherent imagery. It almost decides to abandon reality entirely in like the last third or so, and just get lost in its imagery. And like I said, you can see by the sounds of it where this could work with somebody that had a real grasp on this concept and seemed to have an idea of what they wanted to do. But I wasn't getting that vibe, really, from this much at all. Yes, and I think it wants you to keep asking, is what you're looking at real, or is it not? Is what she's saying actually what's going on, or is she just insane? But the way it's executed by this point, you really just don't give a shit at the time where you could be asking that stuff. Where it's like, it seems way too far-fetched, and she does come off way too, like, off-balance for it to seem... Like, it never feels like it could be a real possibility, but it feels like the movie wants so much to head in that direction and be ambiguous, but just none of it comes out. Like, the more I'm thinking about the movie, like, the less I like it now. Like, I liked it more a couple of hours ago. When I watched it before I went to Birds of Prey. And before I left for Birds of Prey, I was into this a little more and kind of liked the ideas behind it more. But it's like, the more I think about it now, the more the execution just really, really fails. Really, the only thing keeping it afloat is Brie's performance. And Alison Brie's not even an actress I'm that much of a fan of, like, at all. Like, she's never really done anything I can think of that stood out to me. I haven't watched, like, Glow or anything, but she's just never really done anything stand out to me, apart from maybe the Sesame Street scene and the 5-year engagement. But that's pretty much the only thing that comes to mind when I think of Alison Brie. Everything else I just kind of forget entirely. So that's not a good sign, but she does handle some of the more dramatic scenes also in that sort of descent, where she gets more and more lost in these, like, conspiracy theories and all that other stuff. And the way she reacts to she has a love interest early on that goes in some interesting directions and maybe some unexpected directions. And the way she plays those scenes where she starts off as, like, really innocent, and you can tell she hasn't dated in a while or at all with her interactions here, and that's great. And then as we see her get more frantic as it goes on, feels pretty natural, even if the movie itself seems like in a weird place as far as pacing goes. But yeah, so that's what it does. It gets kind of lost in all of its bullshit until we get an ending where it basically just feels like the movie itself said, well, I don't have anything else, so we're just going to end here. It's like it just sort of gave up. So, like I said, it didn't really feel like there was a whole lot of a plan. It felt like there was a concept here and a setup, but then it's like, it also kind of gets the idea of, now, did they really, really write something, or was it that improvised to the point that the movie itself just kind of trailed off? I don't know, but yeah, so that's pretty much what that is. It's probably about the kind of movie you'd expect out of a movie called Horse Girl that was at Sundance. So there that is. Next week, I think, is Sonic and the Force Majeure remake with Will Ferrell and Joey Louis-Dreyfus. So we'll see how those turned out. And I am going to start doing the Versus thing, at least a little bit. The first one is going to be one that kind of coincides with the upcoming holiday, and then there was one I had planned before that that's going to be after that. So there's at least two of those that are going to be coming now that award season is ending on Sunday. So we have all of that. So until all of that stuff, I think that's going to be it.